Have you ever wondered what happens when a perfect life is built on a foundation of lies? What does it take for someone to walk away from everything they've ever known to find the one thing they truly need? This is a story about a woman who vanished to find herself, and a man who had to lose it all to finally see the truth. The last time Arthur saw his wife, she was standing in the doorway of their penthouse, bathed in soft morning light, a gentle smile on her face. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child, and to him, it was the perfect picture of domestic bliss. He blew her a kiss, promised he wouldn't be late, and walked out of her life forever. He didn't know it yet. What he would discover in the next 9 months would not only destroy his world but would redefine the very meaning of power, love, and loss. Before we dive into this gripping story, take a moment to leave a comment below with the name of your city. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is joining us from on this journey. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon sun was a river of liquid gold pouring through the panoramic windows of the penthouse that Anna called home. It glinted off the chrome legs of the minimalist Italian sofa, warmed the polished marble floors, and cast long shadows from the abstract sculptures to the state-of-the-art kitchen. At 28, Anna lived a life most people only saw in magazines. She was the beautiful 6-month pregnant wife of Arthur Pierce, a charismatic real estate magnate whose ambition was as vast as the urban landscape of the city visible from their balcony. Their life was a carefully curated collection of perfect moments, weekend trips to the coast, surprise diamond earrings left on her pillow, romantic dinners at restaurants with a year-long waiting list. Arthur was a master of grand gestures, a man who knew how to build an empire and, seemingly, a perfect marriage. Anna had once believed in that perfection with every fiber of her being. She had fallen in love with his sharp intelligence, his disarming smile, and the way he made her feel like the only person in a crowded room. He was her anchor, her partner, her future. But lately, the anchor had felt adrift. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift had occurred in the architecture of their relationship. The foundation felt less stable. Arthur's schedule, once predictable, had become a chaotic mess of late-night meetings that stretched into the early morning and last-minute business trips that he only mentioned while packing his suitcase. The easy affection that defined them, the casual touches, the whispered jokes, had been replaced by a polite, almost formal distance. When he looked at her, his eyes seemed to look right through her, his mind already on the next deal, the next conquest. Anna tried to rationalize. It's the stress of a new acquisition, she would tell herself. It's the pressure of maintaining his empire. Maybe, just maybe, it was her. The pregnancy had made her more sensitive, her emotions a turbulent sea of hormones. She found herself scrutinizing his every word, every glance, looking for cracks in a facade she desperately wanted to remain flawless. Was she just being a cliché, the needy, hormonal, pregnant wife? The thought made her cringe. Determined to bridge the growing chasm between them, she doubled her efforts. She became the epitome of the loving, supportive wife. She cooked his favorite meals even when the smell made her morning sickness flare up. She left small notes in his briefcase filled with words of encouragement and love. She would send him ultrasound pictures of their unborn son, small black and white images of a future she was building for them, for their family. "Look at his little hands, Arthur," she would text, her heart swollen with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "He's waving at you." His replies were always late, always brief. "That's incredible, Anna. Can't wait to meet him." The words were right, but the feeling was wrong. They were hollow, like echoes in a lifeless room. One night, she waited up for him, a pot of his favorite bolognese sauce simmering on the stove. The clock ticked past 8, then 9, then 10. She called his cell and it went straight to voicemail. She sent a text with no reply. A little after 11, he walked in, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers and the cold of a late city night. "Sorry, darling," he said, loosening his tie as he walked past her. "The Henderson Building deal is a monster. I'm exhausted." He didn't kiss her. He didn't even look at the beautifully set table. He just walked to the shower, leaving her alone in the kitchen. The scent of his infidelity hung in the air, more potent than the aroma of her carefully prepared meal. She stood there for a long time, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The baby kicked, a small, insistent movement against her palm. It was a reminder of the life she was nurturing, a life she had to protect. In that moment, surrounded by the opulent emptiness of her perfect life, Anna felt a cold dread settle in her bones. This wasn't just an exaggerated hormonal reaction. It was real. The beautiful dream she was living was unraveling at the edges, and she was terrified of what would happen when it finally came completely undone. She needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed her. The decision to leave was not a dramatic, tear-filled choice. It was a quiet, logical conclusion. She couldn't raise her son in a home filled with lies. She couldn't let her son grow up thinking that what his father was doing was acceptable, that love was disposable. She had to protect him. And to do that, she had to disappear. The rest of the day, she moved with a strange, detached efficiency. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in her chest, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose. She sat down at her laptop, not shopping for designer baby clothes, but researching small, forgotten coastal towns, places where a person could be anonymous, where the sea could wash away the past. She got in touch with a distant cousin she hadn't spoken to in years, a woman who lived a quiet life in Florianopolis, and asked vague questions about the southern coast of Brazil. She began to silently extract herself from the life that Arthur had built for her. She went to the bank and withdrew a few thousand in cash, a small enough amount not to raise suspicion. She organized her belongings, packing a single discreet backpack with only the most essential items. Comfortable clothes, a few beloved books, the prenatal vitamins she was so diligent about, and a small, worn teddy bear that had been hers as a child. Everything else, the designer handbags, the expensive jewelry, the life she had once valued, she left behind. It was all just part of the scenery, props in a play she was no longer a part of. Her final act was the most painful. She walked into their bedroom and took the large, silver-framed wedding photo from the nightstand. It was a picture of them on a beach, both tan and laughing, the image of happiness. With numb fingers, she opened the back of the frame, took out the photo, and tore it in half. The sound of the paper ripping was a final, definitive severing of their bond. She left the empty frame on the nightstand, a silent, stark testament to what he had broken. She hid the packed backpack in the back of her closet, behind a row of party dresses she would never wear again. As she looked around the quiet, opulent penthouse, she felt a profound sense of detachment. This was no longer her home. It was a gilded cage, and she had just found the key. She would wait for the right moment, a time when he was on one of his business trips, and then she would walk out the door and never look back. She wasn't running away. She was running toward a future she would build for herself and her son. A future built on truth, not lies. Arthur came home 2 days later, humming a song from a commercial he had heard on the radio. He was riding high. The Henderson Building deal had been a massive success, a testament to his prowess, and he had spent the last 48 hours celebrating with Simone at a boutique hotel. A celebration that had solidified their secret partnership in both business and pleasure. He walked into the penthouse expecting to find Anna on the sofa, probably asleep with a book on her lap, ready to be placated with a story about his grueling work trip and a gift from the airport. Instead, he was met with a disturbing silence. The apartment was immaculate, too tidy. There were no magazines on the coffee table, no half-empty water glass on the counter. It felt sterile, like a hotel room that had just been cleaned. "Anna," he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. No reply. He went into the bedroom. The bed was perfectly made. He checked the closet. A significant portion of her clothes was gone. Not the expensive dresses or the designer suits, he noticed with a strange sense of relief, but her everyday items, jeans, shirts, comfortable shoes. He went into the bathroom. Her toothbrush was gone, along with her favorite face wash and the prenatal vitamins she was so diligent about. A flicker of irritation lit up inside him. Was this some kind of game? A dramatic, passive-aggressive punishment for his absence? He grabbed his phone to call her, ready to scold her for her childish behavior. It was then that he saw it, sitting on her nightstand. Her cell phone, and next to it, the empty silver frame, its glass staring at him like a blind eye. A cold knot of dread began to form in his stomach. This wasn't a game. Anna would never leave her phone behind. It was her lifeline, her connection to her family, to her doctor, to the world. He frantically called her mother, her sister, her two closest friends. Each conversation was the same. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. The last person to speak to her was 3 days ago, and she had seemed, in their words, a little down, but fine. Real, pure panic finally set in. He called the police, his voice a convincing performance of a distraught husband on the verge of collapse. The police who arrived were professional but detached, their questions sharp and probing. Had they fought? Were there financial problems? Was she unhappy? Arthur played his part perfectly, painting a picture of a happy marriage and a deeply loved, though emotionally fragile, pregnant wife. The next day, the story exploded. Pregnant wife of millionaire Arthur Pierce disappears without a trace. Anna's smiling face was plastered on news websites and television screens. The media descended like vultures, their cameras and microphones a constant presence outside the Vasconcellos Tower. Arthur, guided by a team of high-priced public relations experts, embraced the role of the grieving husband. He gave tearful press conferences, his voice breaking as he pleaded for any information to bring his beloved Anna home. He announced a $100,000 reward, a sum designed to signal both his desperation and his immense wealth. The public bought the story. Sympathy poured in from all corners. He was the tragic hero, the powerful man brought to his knees by a cruel twist of fate. Privately, however, the narrative was very different. In the stolen moments he had with Simone, his public grief would turn into a bitter, resentful anger. "She's doing this to punish me," he would seethe during a whispered phone call. "She must have found out. This is her way of destroying me, of making me look like the villain." Simone, for her part, tried to be supportive, but a seed of resentment was beginning to take root. She had agreed to be the mistress of a powerful, charismatic industry titan, a position that came with glamour and excitement. She had not agreed to this. The ghostly presence of Anna was everywhere. She was in the sympathetic glances of strangers, in the hushed whispers of Arthur's colleagues, in the very air of the penthouse that still seemed to belong to another woman. Anna, in her absence, had become a martyr, a saint, and Simone was, by default, the villain of a story she couldn't control. Arthur's public pleas grew more desperate, his performance more polished. He sat for a primetime interview, wiping dry eyes as he looked directly into the camera. "Anna, my love, if you can see this, please let us know you're safe. I can't live without you. Our son needs his mother. I need you." But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into a month, the investigation stalled. There were no leads, no sightings, no activity on her bank accounts or credit cards. It was as if Anna had simply walked out of his life and dissolved into thin air. Arthur's public facade began to crack under the pressure of his own lies, the gulf between his private fury and his public grief widening into an unsustainable chasm. He was the concerned husband to the world. But in the middle of the night, staring at the empty space beside him in bed, he was just a man haunted by the ghost of a woman he had fatally underestimated. While Arthur was performing for the cameras in the city, Anna was 3,000 kilometers away, breathing the salty, humid air of the coast. She had become Clara, a name she took from a novel she loved. The town she chose was a small, forgotten coastal spot called Parody. It was a place of time-worn beach houses, a single main street with a grocery store and a restaurant, and a rugged, windswept beach where the relentless waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashed against volcanic rock formations. It was the perfect place to be invisible. Her new home was a small wooden cabin located on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was old. It creaked in the wind, and the smell of salt and damp wood was permanently etched into its walls. After the sterile, modern opulence of the penthouse, the cabin felt wonderfully real and grounding. She paid the first 6 months' rent in cash to an elderly gentleman who seemed more interested in her promise to take care of the small garden than in her lack of references. Life as Clara was simple, quiet, and anonymous. She was the polite, solitary newcomer who kept to herself. She did her shopping on Tuesdays, smiled at the cashier, and returned to her cabin. Her days fell into a gentle, healing rhythm. She woke with the sun, made a simple breakfast, and spent hours walking on the beach, the cool sand sinking beneath her feet. She watched the fishermen mending their nets and the seabirds diving for their prey. The vast, churning expanse of the ocean made her own problems feel small and manageable. The constant roar of the waves was a soothing balm to her fractured soul, washing away the noise and deception of her old life. To support herself, she fell back on her skills as a graphic designer, a career she had put on the back burner to become Mrs. Arthur Pierce. She found freelance work online through platforms that allowed her to work for clients all over the world, receiving payments through a secure, untraceable system. Her work was her connection to the outside world, but it was a connection on her own terms, filtered through the security of a screen and a pseudonym. She meticulously avoided creating any official records. She didn't get a driver's license. She didn't register to vote. Most importantly, she avoided doctors. She knew it was a risk, but her fear of being found was greater than her fear of the unknown. She bought books on childbirth and prepared herself for the monumental task ahead. She was a good student, diligent and focused. She learned about breathing techniques, birthing positions, and how to deal with potential complications. Her pregnancy became her private, sacred journey, a partnership just between her and her unborn son. At night, she would sit by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of lavender and rose, and she would write. She filled journals with letters to her son, telling him not about the father who had betrayed them, but about the life she dreamed of for him, a life of honesty, resilience, and quiet strength. She wrote about the courage it takes to walk away from something that is broken and the strength it takes to build something new from the wreckage. "I want you to know the sound of the ocean, my love," she wrote one night, her hand resting on her belly, which was now big and stretched. "I want you to know that your world is not defined by glass towers and empty promises, but by the tides, the stars, and the goodness of your own heart. You are my new beginning. You are my brave new world." The months passed. Her belly grew, and so did her confidence. She was no longer Anna Vasconcelos, the millionaire's wife. She was Clara, a woman who supported herself, propped up not by a man's wealth, but by her own ingenuity and determination. Her labor began on a wild, stormy night at the end of winter. The wind howled around the small cabin, and the rain beat against the windows in angry, horizontal sheets. The power went out, plunging her into darkness, illuminated only by a few candles she had prepared. She was alone, terrified, but also strangely strengthened. As the storm raged outside, a different kind of storm raged within her. It was primal, painful, and utterly transformative. There were no doctors, no nurses, and no husband holding her hand. There was just her, the ancient wisdom of her body, and the fierce, protective love for the son she was about to meet. In the hours before dawn, as the storm finally began to subside, her son was born. She pulled him to her chest, his tiny, warm body slick against hers, and his first cry mingled with the sound of the receding waves. She looked at his perfect, wrinkled little face, and tears of exhaustion, relief, and overwhelming love streamed down her cheeks. She had done it. She had brought him into the world safely, on her own terms. She named him Noah, a name that meant rest and comfort. He was her ark in the storm, her promise of a new beginning. Holding him in her arms in the quiet, candlelit cabin, with the ocean as her witness, Anna felt a profound sense of peace. She had been erased. But in her place, a new woman had been born. A mother, a survivor, a force to be reckoned with. In the months that followed Anna's disappearance, Arthur's carefully constructed world began to unravel, one insidious thread at a time. He had always seen himself as the sole architect of his success, the visionary, the dealmaker. He saw Anna as a beautiful, supportive accessory to his life, the person who managed the trivial domestic details so he could focus on the important work of building his empire. He never understood that she wasn't just an accessory. She was the foundation. Anna had been the silent, invisible force behind his polished public persona. It was she who remembered his clients' birthdays and their wives' favorite flowers. It was she who flawlessly organized the charity dinners and corporate parties that were crucial for networking, ensuring every detail was perfect, from the seating charts to the wine pairings. She was the one who managed their social calendar with the precision of a military strategist, creating the effortless illusion of a man who had it all. Without her, the cracks began to show. He missed important meetings because he had forgotten to check the shared calendar she used to manage. He offended a potential investor by forgetting his name, a detail Anna would have drilled into him before the event. Deals that had once seemed certain began to falter, his legendary Midas touch seeming to have abandoned him. His colleagues and rivals began to whisper. His wife's disappearance was a tragedy, yes, but the subsequent decline in his business acumen was a weakness. And in their world, weakness was blood in the water. The rumors about his affair with Simone, once whispered speculation, began to gain traction. A disgruntled former assistant, fired by Arthur in a fit of rage, leaked details of his frequent late-night meetings with his head of marketing. The story didn't make the major news, but it circulated with venomous speed through the inner circles of the city's business and social elite. The public sympathy that had once been his shield began to wear thin, replaced by a cynical and knowing suspicion. He was no longer the tragic hero. He was becoming a pariah. His relationship with Simone, which had been a thrilling escape, soured into a toxic codependency. Simone had been drawn to the powerful, confident industry titan. The man she now lived with was a shadow of that person, irritable, paranoid, and obsessed with his missing wife. She had moved into the penthouse, a move she had dreamed of, but it felt like she was occupying a museum dedicated to Saint Anna. Arthur refused to get rid of Anna's things. Her clothes still hung in the closet, her books were still on the nightstand, her perfume still lightly lingered in the air. Simone felt like a ghost haunting another woman's life. She resented Anna's persistent, sanctified presence. She resented the pitying looks she received from people who knew or suspected her role in the marriage's dissolution. And most of all, she resented Arthur's growing inability to separate her from his downfall. "If you hadn't been so careless, she might never have found out," he had snarled at her one night after losing a major contract. "I was careless." Simone snapped back, her voice dripping with scorn. "You were the one who was married, Arthur. You were the one who lied to her every day. This isn't my fault. This is the mess you made." The arguments became more frequent, more vicious. The glamour of the affair had disappeared, revealing the ugly reality underneath. A relationship built on deception and convenience couldn't withstand real pressure. Simone began discreetly sending out her resume, building her own exit strategy. She had latched on to a falling star, and she was smart enough to know when it was time to let go. Arthur, meanwhile, was trapped in a downward spiral of his own making. He drank more, slept less. He found himself wandering the silent, cavernous penthouse at night, touching the things Anna had left behind, a strange mix of fury and a longing so deep it felt like a physical ache. He had thought he could have it all, the devoted wife and the exciting mistress. He had believed he was in control. Now, he was losing everything, and he couldn't understand why. He had fatally miscalculated the value of what he had, and the true cost of his betrayal was only just beginning to come due. The Golden Hope Gala was the jewel of the city's philanthropic season, a glamorous event where the city's old money and new power collided. For Arthur, it was more than a party. It was a lifeline. His business was bleeding, his reputation was in tatters, and he desperately needed new investors. He needed to project an image of stability and strength, to remind the world that he was still Arthur Pierce, the man who could move mountains. He arrived alone, Simone having finally and officially left him the week before. A departure that felt less like a broken heart and more like another asset being liquidated. He moved through the opulent ballroom, a glass of champagne in his hand, forcing a smile, shaking hands, his eyes scanning the crowd for potential backers. He felt a bead of sweat run down his back. The vultures were circling. He could feel their eyes on him, their whispers following him like a shadow. And then the room went quiet. Not a sudden, dramatic silence, but a slow, rolling wave of stillness that started at the entrance and spread through the crowd. Heads turned, conversations faltered. Arthur spun around, annoyed by the distraction, and his world stopped. Standing in the arched doorway, framed by the light, was Anna. But she wasn't the Anna he remembered. The soft, compliant woman he had taken for granted was gone. In her place was a goddess. She was radiant, dressed in a stunning emerald green gown that clung to her curves, her hair styled in elegant waves, her face lit by a serene, unshakable confidence. She looked powerful. She looked magnificent. And she was not alone. Cradled in her arms, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket, was a beautiful baby boy with a shock of dark hair and his mother's calm, observant eyes. Arthur felt the champagne flute slip from his numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo the destruction of his own composure. It was her. After 9 months of silence, of nothing, here she was, looking as if she had just walked out of a dream. His dream, the one he had destroyed. Before he could move, before he could process what he was seeing, several of the city's most influential figures, the very people Arthur was desperate to impress, converged on Anna. There was Jonathan Miller, the respected head of the gala's charity foundation, who greeted her with a warm, paternal kiss on the cheek. There was Eleonora Mendez, the matriarch of one of the city's oldest families, who cooed over the baby. A murmur ran through the crowd as the truth dawned. Anna wasn't just a guest. A quick glance at the event program in a nearby guest's hand confirmed the unthinkable. On the list of the foundation's board members, there was a new name, Anna Dubois, her maiden name. She hadn't just survived. She had ascended. The position on that board was something Arthur had coveted for years, a seat that guaranteed access and influence. And she had won it. She moved through the room with a natural grace, politely ignoring Arthur's very existence. She laughed with a tech billionaire, discussed politics with a senator, and charmed everyone she met. She wasn't the victim. She was the victor. Finally, Arthur managed to corner her near a secluded terrace. "Anna," he breathed, his voice raw. "What is this? Where have you been?" She turned to him, her expression not of anger or pain, but of a cold, distant assessment. She adjusted Noah in her arms. "I've been building a life, Arthur. A real one." "A life? You disappeared. I thought we all thought you were. You thought I was what? A victim?" "Helpless," she finished for him, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "That was always your biggest mistake. You never truly saw me." "I want to see my son," he said, his eyes fixed on the baby. "His name is Noah," she said, her voice firm and protective. "And you can't. Not like this. I left to protect him from a world of lies and betrayal. I won't bring him back into it." Across the room, Simone, who had come to the gala with a new, older, more stable benefactor, watched the exchange. She saw the power dynamic clear as day. She saw the way people clustered around Anna, the genuine respect and admiration in their eyes. She saw the way Arthur was looking at his wife, defeated, desperate, utterly impotent. In that moment, Simone knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice in leaving him. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost the source of his power. He was an empty man. And Anna was the one who had finally exposed him. Arthur reached out a hand, as if to touch Noah's cheek, but Anna took a step back, her eyes like shards of ice. "Don't," she said, her voice low but carrying the weight of an iron command. "You forfeited that right 9 months ago on a leather sofa in your office." She turned her back on him, leaving him standing alone on the terrace. The sounds of the party, of his failure, washing over him. He was the ghost now, invisible in a room where his wife was the shining sun. The Golden Hope Gala was not an ending. It was a declaration. In the weeks that followed, Arthur's desperate attempts to contact Anna were met with an impenetrable wall of silence. His calls were rerouted to her assistant, a professionally efficient woman who informed him that Ms. Dubois's schedule was full. His emails went unanswered. The legal documents that arrived at his office were not for a messy, emotional divorce, but for a meticulously prepared alimony and custody agreement from one of the city's top family law attorneys. The terms were non-negotiable. He would provide financial support, and in return, he would be granted supervised visitation twice a month in a neutral location, upon completion of a court-mandated anger management and co-parenting course. There was no room for discussion. It was a business deal, and she held all the cards. Anna, or rather Ms. Dubois, had played her hand with masterful precision. The story of her comeback was even more compelling than the story of her disappearance. She gave one, and only one, exclusive interview to a respected journalist. She didn't sling mud or revel in the sordid details of Arthur's affair. Instead, she spoke with eloquence and passion about the systemic challenges faced by women and children in crisis. She announced that she was using her position on the board and her personal story to launch a new initiative through the Golden Hope Foundation, the Project Hope. It would establish a network of shelters and resource centers for women who needed to escape abusive or unsustainable situations, providing them with legal aid, financial counseling, and the tools to build a new, independent life. She had turned her pain into a platform, her personal tragedy into a public mission. She was no longer defined by her relationship with Arthur Pierce. She was defined by her work, her resilience, and her commitment to helping others. The public, and more importantly, the city's philanthropic elite, were fascinated. Donations flooded into Project Hope. Anna became a celebrated and respected figure, a symbol of strength and grace. While her public life was one of influence and purpose, her private life remained anchored in the quiet simplicity she had found in Parody. She kept the seaside cabin, flying back and forth on a private plane, a luxury provided by the very alimony payments Arthur was forced to make. The cabin was her sanctuary, the place where she was not Ms. Dubois, the formidable board member, but simply Mom. She and Noah would spend weeks at a time there, away from the noise and ambition of the city. Their days were filled with the simple, profound joys she had dreamed of for him. They would walk on the beach, collecting shells and watching the sandpipers race along the shoreline. She would read stories to him, not of fairy tales about princes and princesses, but of courageous explorers, brilliant scientists, and bold artists. She raised him with the sound of the ocean as his lullaby, and the lessons of self-reliance and courage as his foundation. She taught him that strength wasn't about how much you had, but about how much you could overcome. She taught him that a home wasn't defined by the size of its rooms, but by the amount of love and truth within its walls. One night, as she sat on the porch of her cabin, watching Noah take his first wobbly steps on the soft grass, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "I'm so sorry," it read. "I know it's too late, but I'm so sorry for everything." It was from Arthur. She read the message, took a deep breath of the salty air, and deleted it without replying. She had no space for his apology. It was a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to her. Her triumph was not in his regret, but in her own freedom. Disappearing had saved her. Returning had proven her strength. But this quiet, peaceful, authentic life she had built for herself and her son, this was her lasting victory. 5 years later, the sun cast a warm, golden glow over a park buzzing with life. It was the annual Project Hope Community Picnic, an event Anna had started to celebrate the families her foundation supported. Laughter filled the air as children played, their faces painted with bright colors. Anna, radiant and at ease, moved through the crowd, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. Noah, now a bright-eyed and energetic 6-year-old, darted between the tables, a small soccer ball at his feet. At the edge of the park, a man stood watching, his hands in his pockets. It was Arthur. The years had softened his sharp edges, replacing his arrogance with a quiet humility. He was no longer a titan of industry, but a man who had painstakingly rebuilt a smaller, more honest life. He had completed every course, never missed a visit, and had become a significant, anonymous donor to Project Hope. He wasn't here to reclaim anything, but simply to witness the world she had built. Anna saw him, and their eyes met across the lawn. There was no anger, no pain, only a calm acknowledgement. As if on cue, Noah spotted him. "Dad," he shouted, his voice clear and happy. He ran towards Arthur, not with the hesitation of a stranger, but with the easy familiarity of a child who knew he was loved. He proudly held up a colorful drawing of a boat on a vast ocean. Arthur knelt, his expression one of genuine warmth as he praised the drawing. "It's our house," Noah explained. "Mommy says it's our ark." Watching them, a gentle smile touched Anna's lips. She had done it. She had built a life so full of love and truth that it had room even for forgiveness. Her victory wasn't just about her own success, but in creating a world where her son could have a father who was present and a mother who was whole. Arthur looked up and gave her a small, respectful nod, a silent thank you for her grace. He was a chapter in her past, but Noah was their shared future, and in that future, there was finally peace. She had lost a husband but had found herself, and in doing so, had given her son the entire world. Anna's incredible journey from heartbreak to healing shows us that sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives are the ones we write ourselves, after the original story falls apart. It's a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest pain. If this story of resilience and rebirth moved you, please show your support by giving it a like and sharing it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, so you won't miss our next powerful story. Thank you for being part of our community.